So here's an issue I've never heard anyone else doing cold emails or simply cold acquisition talking about, and it's something that I've been struggling for virtually 6 months or so, and I've finally, at least I think I found a solution. And the problem is this: it's that everything is linked. So when you try to SOP something, so SOP, standard operating procedure, when you try to standardize or productize a process, so that could be list building, for example, well, you run into an issue because, for example, with emails, you have targeting that is linked to copywriting, and that is also linked to list building, right? So essentially, if you try to take each apart and try to systemize, productize each process alone, that won't work. And it's the hurdle I've been facing for the past 6 months, is that I've been trying to productize, for example, copywriting, which is a very daunting task. But I've had the issue because, well, okay, I have templates that have worked, but first of all, these templates don't work for every single niche, every single offer. I always have to adapt them and reread every single email, so that doesn't work. If I go into list building, I've tried to automate list building where I have the automations set up. It's not a problem of fluency in terms of automation, but rather in terms of strategy. So imagine we want to reach out to e-commerce brands that, sell footwear. Well, first of all, if you had this productized or automated, let's say 100% or 90%, well, you would have to follow a specific framework. So maybe a trigger where you add information through a Google Sheet, and then it does the rest for you. Well, when you add the information through Google Sheet, you'd essentially have to, first of all, add all the filters for the lead source you're going to choose, right? Because the lead source varies extremely, actually. They're extremely different depending on the offer. So that's once again another problem, right? You have an offer and you have an ICP. So you could basically put all of that into targeting, but essentially the source of the list will vary depending on the targeting, which, is logical, right? But when you try to automate this, the first thought is, okay, well, how do I make this not linked anymore, or at least sequential? So do I first of all figure out the targeting, then with the targeting I figure out the list building or stuff like that? But then you run into other issues, which are, well, first of all, you try a targeting angle, you try to build that list, and you end up with, say, 1,000 contacts. And I know every single marketer or cold emailer here will have had this issue, right? You think you have a great idea, a great target, but you only have 1,000 leads there. So that's not enough. You have to do something else. And so there's a few tricks you can do, but essentially you're going to have to try something radically new. You can't just expand the job titles, right? So what I mean by expand is just, if you're targeting CMOs, then you'll also be targeting CCOs, COOs, CFOs, CSOs, blah, blah, blah. So essentially the solution I found is to go about this sequentially. And I know I said that's an issue, but stick with me. First of all, you have the practical tasks and the mental tasks, I call them, right? So mental tasks is something that requires your brain and not just effort. So not just spending 2 hours on your laptop and not using any of your brain. So what are the mental tasks? Well, first of all, they're figuring out the ICP, because most oftentimes I've had dozens of clients that simply, they have an offer that works, or they actually sometimes don't even have an offer, but they have a value proposition that works with a niche, and that's worked great through referrals, because they don't have to have a compelling offer to sell, because like people refer them and therefore they close more, blah blah blah. So essentially you're going to first have to create the ICP, or just narrow it down. If they have the ICP figured out, you're going to have to narrow it down or adapt it to cold emails, because if you want a functional email, you can't just blast out to every single person on earth, right? You have to be very specific, especially nowadays. So ICP, then you have to work on the offer. So that's a ton of work too, but let's say you've got that out of the way. You have to work on the different value propositions that apply to the different ICPs. And that's been the biggest breakthrough for me in terms of standardizing the procedure, right? It's matching ICPs with value propositions, and then the final cherry on top of the cake is adding a trigger. So adding some sort of action that the lead must take for them to be added to the list, right? And that allows us to do something at the end of the funnel, you could call it, or the automation anyway. So just this is the framework to start the process. Then with the ICP and value propositions, you're essentially good for the list building. So I won't get into that, but essentially find the platform that has the most leads and just scrape all of them. Quite easy. The most leads that match the ICP. Keep in mind, like, don't get me wrong. That is the first and second thing, right? So first of all, brain power thingy. Then that ties into list building, which is a practical one. So I didn't follow my framework, but anyway. The first one is mental task. The second one is a practical task, which is list building. And then once you've created the list, then you can get into another mental task, which is copywriting, right? So then you can template your copywriting. And the cool part about it is that since you have this outlined, let's just put it that way. Let's not say automated, because sometimes it's just not, or templated. Let's just say outlined. You have this outlined. Well, you can use AI to navigate through different templates and figure out which one to use. So imagine you have 10 best performing templates, and with AI you could say, okay, well, for this ICP, for this value proposition, we're going to use this campaign, right? And I know when I say it like this, it might seem like a tough task to do, but it really isn't. You just have to break down every single template, their use case, and then just ask AI to find the best one. Not that hard. Anyway, so now you have copywriting. You have like 50% of the copywriting done, because now you have a templated email. Now you just need to adapt, and you can never automate copywriting. If anyone says they can, just don't believe them, because you can't. But you can template it so that it's a ton faster. So that is essentially the first frameworks. And then if you want to get into a bit more detail, you're going to use AI personalization for some of these emails. So that'll depend on the copywriting. But essentially, it forms a loop, right? You have the brainstorming, which is the targeting, ICP, blah, 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 list building, copywriting, and then if you want to use personalization, then you go back to personalize. You go to personalization here, but then you actually go back to list building, right? Why did I say that? You go back to list building simply. Oh yeah, of course. Simply because you have to enrich your list, right? So you have to work on your list, do a ton of other stuff, which narrows down. When you, like, top of funnel, you might have had maybe 50,000 prospects you can reach out to, and then it just gets lower and lower and lower the further personalized or the further segmented you go, but the better the replies. So I hope that explains an issue I've been facing, and I know it's an issue that probably everyone that's good at cold emails or cold outreach as a whole has faced, because it's a tough thing to automate or to standardize or productize, whatever you want to call it. But I feel like I've broken it down into manageable steps here, that it's really just a straight line now to success. So hope this is valuable. Hope that might save you a ton of headaches that I've had to make. But keep in mind that I've only come to this realization because I've made the mistakes and because I took the time to brainstorm this subject, and you might have to do the same too. Even if you've heard this like you took notes on this video or whatever, I would actually advise against taking notes. Just use this as inspiration, and if it's useful, actually spend 1-2 hours reviewing your entire process and seeing what is templatable and what isn't, and what's linked to what. That's the most important. So maybe create a flowchart. That's actually what I'm going to do after this. Create a flowchart of exactly all the operations and the inputs and the outputs that each operation you make has, right? And the cool part about this is that you'll really get a structure of your operations instead of it just being in your mind. So I'm going to do that right now, and I hope this was valuable. And once again, thank you for listening. If you found it valuable, feel free to comment what you liked, or if this helped you at all. If you have questions, feel free to ask. And if not, I hope you